in Biden's briefing, he talked about the future of the Republican Party.
And do you believe you'll be running against former President Trump?
Oh, come on. I don't even think about it. I have no idea. I have no idea whether there'll be a Republican Party. Do you?
I'm going to go with, based on gerrymandering and the makeup of the legislatures and Koch brothers, I'm going to say, yeah, there's still going to be a Republican Party. What are your bets?
2022, you know.
What's that?
And they're favored in 2022 for good reasons to retake the House National.
Yeah. I mean, Rob, do Republicans exist in Pennsylvania, a place that everybody thinks is this blue state? Or sort of?
Yeah, we lost 3 seats in this last election cycle, so they're even more powerful now. But they're struggling in the sense that there has been an exodus from their party because of all the Trumpism. And the other thing is, for gerrymandering in Pennsylvania, we're one of the top 3 worst, most gerrymandered states that have been gerrymandered to the benefit of the Republican Party specifically, with some notable exceptions for urban white Democrats. But that's probably another situation that we should talk about, is that in Pennsylvania, there's a 5-person commission. It's the 4 floor leaders in the Pennsylvania General Assembly, and the 5th person has to be unanimously selected by those 4. So they rarely agree on who that 5th person is. So the state Supreme Court gets to choose who the 5th is, and the state Supreme Court leans 5-2 Democrat. So Republicans are in a position where they're going to have to play nicely to make sure that 5th person is better than whoever the state Supreme Court selects, which means that gerrymandering, or rather redistricting, by the end of this year could be of at least incremental benefit to the Commonwealth, which would inure to the benefit, I imagine, of Democrats somewhat. But the fact that this process is not an independent commission is deeply problematic. But how folks operate from state to state, it's not a national thing. It's from state to state, which is why people really need to know who their state lawmakers are, because so much of what impacts our lives is decided on the state level. And I remind people, slavery was, a state law. In Pennsylvania, it was legal for a husband to rape his wife up until very recently, our lifetimes. And now's an extension of patriarchy codified under state law, on and on and on. In Pennsylvania, if you are queer, you are a second-class citizen. You can be fired for being gay, and it's perfectly legal outside of any of the blue bubbles, about 36 blue bubbles across the state. But if I'm driving and I'm queer and I'm driving with my partner from Philly to Harrisburg, and I stop in a little town and we're holding hands, they don't have to serve us. I can't get a room. It's all legal in Pennsylvania. State laws matter.
So the big question I have, and I think a lot of people in our generation, younger, have, is clearly Republicans have, and this is what the opening of the show is about, was they've been masters at playing with the electoral laws across this country, whether it's gerrymandering or as the Democrats pull out of state parties and unions have been attacked, the state level legislatures have been taken over across this country, where Democrats just didn't exist. There's no parties. Want to run as a Democrat in Wyoming? Find the Democratic Party. Find it on the number doesn't work. It hasn't worked for 30 years. So these things have all happened over the last 3-4 decades. To protect, understanding that the Republican Party, at least the ideologies, have been dying. There's a new brand now that is reviving a little bit of some young people, but it's not enough. We know mathematically it is not enough, given the millennial generation being the largest in history, most diverse in history, and definitely the most progressive. Gen Z on another, they're going to be, organizing from holograms. I don't know what they're going to be doing from. So is this just a timing thing? At what point is and Ron, I'm going to go to you for this. At what point does the generation start to catch up so fast that even these rules, with little reforms in the legislature, like one outpaces the other. Does that make sense? Arun?
It makes sense to some extent. I mean, I think in a gigantic holistic sense of like, eventually aren't the people who disagree going to die? The answer is yes. Like we will see, we will see a massive party realignment when we see, the generations over the next 10 years start to shift. That is true. However, the demographics, however, all this, you also do need leadership, and we need somebody, and they probably have to be a Democrat who is willing to dig into some huge things, like making federal standards for elections. Like, I think most no one's horrified by the idea of this, the idea that you would have one standard federal thing for elections. Anyone you ask is like, oh, that's a good idea. And most people are, in fact, shocked to find out that there's not, that there's no actual right to vote even enshrined in the Constitution. The thing is so vague about all of this. So again, the theme of this show, right? Let's stop being ambiguous about this stuff and write it down. We just need people who are like willing to make that a hill to die on, because how you vote and how you represent this country is a hill worth dying on.
And Democrats are now seeing this. I mean, there are plenty of states. New York is a perfect example. It had the lowest turnout in the next to most voter restrictive laws, next to Louisiana, just a couple of years ago. And then finally, it was like enough. And other Democrats, incumbents, were like, all right, we're willing to suspend our incumbent protection program, because that's essentially what it is, to have voting reforms. And I feel with this new legislation that protects the voting rights, there's an opportunity here for, like, Chuck Schumer, in a hearing yesterday over this, which we said in our open, it was a hill he's willing to die on. And it's just gotten so bad that even the worst Democrats are like, all right, it's time. Do you feel that way, Rob?
Yeah. And, Pennsylvania is a really good example, because right before the pandemic, we had a bipartisan bill widely supported by Republicans that removed we created no excuse voting, right? Essentially voting by mail. That was a non-controversial bill that was enacted into law. And then 3 months later, we had the pandemic. And then Republicans realized how this could benefit their opponents so much more. And so since then, they've been trying to undo the very thing they promoted. And look, we see what happens in Utah. Utah has had vote by mail exclusively, I believe, for decades. It's a pretty red state.
Yeah, damn
somehow, right? This is, this is a farce. But once people are used to having certain liberties and certain options, regardless of political ideology, they want to keep it. I think it's part of the human experience. I don't know if you want to make it the American experience, but certainly when folks like something and it's afforded to them and it works for them, they don't really want to give it up.
Get your hands off my Obama. Get your hands off of my Medicare, whatever it was.
Right,
exactly.
Right. Government. Get your government hands off of my Social Security. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching and listening to The Nomiki Show. But remember to click like and subscribe on YouTube, and please share on social media. If you're not already a patron, please join us for as low as $5 a month on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show for early and special content. That investment makes a huge difference. We are not corporate media raking in the dough. It's really you guys that are keeping us going. So please consider being a patron. And to our current patrons, thank you so much. We are incredibly grateful to you. We also now have swag. So check us out on thenomikishow.com to get your mugs, your totes, and your stickers.